All right, my name is Christoph Atlas. I work as a security engineer for a crypto exchange, and I've been spending a little bit of time getting up to speed on the Russia and Ukraine conflict and what it means for companies in our industry. I'm going to give some background on this topic, sort of an overview. Most of this is going to be pretty general, not specific to the crypto industry, but there will be a little bit of crypto specific stuff in there. So people may find it useful outside of the industry, but that's mainly what I'm thinking of. So first, let's start off with action items. If you're not going to watch the rest of the presentation, what can you do in light of this conflict? You're going to want to raise your organization to a heightened alert. Not necessarily red alert, but a little bit more carefulness than usual, particularly looking out for nation-state attacks, given that this is a conflict of a military nature, especially with respect to malware, spear phishing, etc. So we're looking out for suspicious emails and communications on other platforms, emails that are pretending to be come from services that your company uses. We're looking out for suspicious attachments. We're doing a lot of scanning of attachments before we're opening those things, all that kind of stuff. On the malware front, make sure that your machines have antivirus capability and that those signatures are kept up to date quickly, as is a quickly evolving situation right now, and malware is out there and is going to be changing quickly. Make sure that you keep your servers and your desktop software up to date with vendor patches. Monitor network intrusion detection systems and logs related to that kind of traffic, looking for attempts to infect systems with known exploits and drop malware. And you're going to want to plan for possible outages within your organization related to the conflict in Ukraine, the possibility that that may spread to a broader area in Europe, and also expect that there will be outages for your users at a minimum within Ukraine, but potentially without as well. And that will include a variety of types of outages that we'll go into some more detail shortly. And now's a good time to review your disaster preparation plans. There can be quick onset events that affect large geographic areas. And so if you have a lot of your workforce or your servers or your data centralized in a particular geographic location, that may pose a problem to you. And you should have some plans to dealing with those kind of situations. So let's talk a little bit about the threat actors that might be involved. Obviously, we have the NATO powers that are looking to put forward reprisals against Russia for the kinetic conflict that's underway. Russia is the most obvious actor in the space. They use information warfare tactics against their opponents and the allies of their opponents. Some of their obvious objectives include disrupting military communication infrastructure in Ukraine right now. They're looking to disrupt civilian communications and other infrastructure to weaken any kind of civil defense capabilities that Ukraine may have to strike back at them or to resist them. And given that there's going to be punishment of Russia in the cyber warfare front from NATO, there may have been preemptive attacks that have taken place. There may be responses to those reprisals. There may be distractions to keep people off their heels, and there may be displays of their capabilities to say, "Hey, look, don't think about getting more involved than you are currently, because this is what we're capable of." On the other hand, Ukrainian cyber warfare capabilities are relatively primitive. Here's a little screenshot here from Reuters where Ukraine is asking their hacker underground to get involved in the fight, and you know that your cyber warfare units are probably not in a great spot if they're asking for civilian help at this point, this late on the conflict. So Ukraine is probably going to be relying on those allies in organizations like NATO. We may also have seen opportunistic nation-state actors taking advantage of this chaos. I'm thinking of China. I'm thinking of North Korea. They may pose as the conflict actors, using particular indicators of compromise to point the finger at Russia or other countries. And we may also see opportunistic cyber criminals that are using this distraction of war to steal funds as well. So they're likely to incorporate some sort of war context into their phishing operations, pretending to, release information from the government or stuff like that, concerning these conflicts. And that's likely to target both companies in the crypto space and as well as the users. And as I mentioned before, not only are the Ukrainians trying to recruit hacktivists, but we're seeing hacktivists getting involved around the world, and it seems so far primarily they are interested in targeting Russian assets. So is Russia themselves, are they likely to target the crypto industry? Probably not in terms of attacking it to disrupt it or take it down. They're more likely to target other kind of NATO industrial infrastructure. I'm thinking of energy, and more favored institutions such as banking that are more critical to the day-to-day operations and more valued by governments. Crypto is not really there yet in terms of the relationship with governments. We are aware of other state actors having targeted the crypto industry in order to augment their war chests. And so somewhat famously, North Korea, there's a group called Lazarus Group that is attributed to the North Korean military, and they've stolen many millions of dollars, maybe billions at this point, from crypto exchanges, primarily South Korean ones at this point. And so we know that these kind of actors are out there. It's also possible that actors like the Russian state may use cryptocurrency exchanges to move funds around and try to get around some of these financial sanctions that are starting to roll out in light of the conflict. Crypto users in Ukraine are in a tough spot, obviously. Crypto, I'm sure, is one of the least of their concerns at the moment, but people living in that area are going to experience widespread outages of energy, wired internet connections, cellular network. We may even see disruptions to the GPS network. We know that the Russian military has those kind of capabilities. The screenshot here demonstrates someone who's living in one of these major cities in Ukraine that has cell service knocked out. And so when we're thinking about how our crypto applications or services work, we should probably think hard about these users who may have only sporadic access to the internet. In the Western world, kind of the default value that we operate of a lot of times is, people are living in these big cities, there's cell towers everywhere, there's Wi-Fi everywhere, right? And so they're just kind of in this constant wash of internet service. But you're also going to have users now that are getting little shreds of internet connectivity for a few seconds here and there. There may be hours in between. And so we should probably design our systems to accommodate those kind of users, allow them to perform some actions in kind of offline modes where possible, and consider the user experience from that sort of perspective. There may also be attacks on DNS and other routing protocols during this conflict, and there's technically not a whole lot that we can do there as individual crypto companies or organizations, but we can consider technologies like onion sites through the Tor network that may provide some circumvention of that. That's not a robust mechanism, but it's something that you can do that would be able to help some users potentially. As far as your team members that are located in Ukraine, obviously the focus should be evacuating the safety where possible. There's going to be limited travel options at this point. Not a lot of planes operating in the area, obviously. Cars, we're hearing a lot of reports of highways just getting totally stacked up and people leaving their cars, abandoning the cars to try and walk to the borders. We're hearing reports of governments banning male refugees leaving the country and urging them to mount a civil defense instead. We're hearing about all kinds of communication outages. So if you're in contact with a team member in Ukraine, I would try to maintain contact through as many different means as possible, since individual applications or services may go out there. I would encourage you to use encrypted messengers where possible, like Signal or WhatsApp. And I would also keep in mind that this is now an active war zone with full-blown, information warfare operations underway. It's going to include things like attacks on mobile devices by roaming mobile attack units, right? And so they'll be intercepting traffic on the cellular networks. They will be delivering malware where possible, and maybe their primary target is people who are actively fighting in kinetic warfare, but there's probably going to be a lot of civilians that are swept up in a kind of dragnet type operation like that. And so if you have these kind of Ukrainian team members, they may be sort of negatively impacted in this way. And when they're able to get to safety, they might want to ditch their mobile devices and acquire clean ones and start from there. If you're able to do that, then you obviously want to log out as many different services and change passwords and stuff like that as possible, assume a state of compromise and start over as much as possible. So Russia is kind of the main actor on the stage right now, thinking about cyber warfare, so it's worth reviewing some of their cyberware capabilities. Russia considers cyber warfare to be, strictly a subset of the broader information warfare. There's the Russian word for that, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce. And so that includes, all the typical cyber warfare stuff, but also psychological warfare and manipulation of media and all the kind of stuff that would fall under that directive. They have many different warfare units, cyber warfare units, that would fall under organizations like the GRU, the SVR, FSB. These are all kinds of military spy type agencies, many of which are derivatives of the Soviet era kind of organizations that exist previously. And there's some allegation that some of these groups also work in concert with Russian cybercriminal groups, that they are directing or paying those kind of groups to do some of their bidding. There's a number of advanced persistent threats that have been attributed to the Russian government. So just to review a few of these kind of most famous ones, or infamous if you prefer. Fancy Bear. This is possibly a GR unit that's been targeting NATO, government, military, and security organizations. And they are particularly well known for their zero-day exploits, spear phishing, malware capabilities. And by malware capabilities, I mean the ability to develop custom, high-tech, state-of-the-art malware, like all the stuff that you would typically hear about in the news. Another unit called Sandworm, possibly also under the GRU. They have been attributed in the past with the attack on the Ukrainian power grid back in 2015. Additional cyber attacks on Ukraine in 2017. The Petya malware that made a lot of news around the world. Interference in the 2017 French presidential elections, and similar capabilities to Fancy Bear. And one more I'll mention here is a Berserk Bear, possibly an FSB unit, with potential links to criminal organizations. And some attacks on water and energy utilities have been attributed to this unit, and there's some belief that they have been engaging in technical surveillance, reconnaissance, and malware distribution. We've seen a number of denial of service attacks related to the conflict, both in terms of attacks on Russian government websites and also against Ukrainian companies or companies that are associated with Ukraine. The Ukrainian attacks seem to precede the kinetic operation, the invasion of Russia, and the Russian ones seem to have been in retaliation to these sort of attacks. There's a number of pieces of malware that are starting to make their rounds and seem to be associated with this conflict, potentially originating from Russia. Particularly right now, there's a lot of focus on this wiper malware, which is being sort of dubbed the HermeticWiper. That's based on a stolen signing certificate that was used to sign the software that represents this malware. from Hermetica Digital Ltd, whatever company that is. And there's a number of good people online doing analysis of this malware. But just briefly here, the attack with this malware seemed to precede the kinetic warfare operation. It infects Windows systems, seems to be highly targeted among organizations that are linked to the Ukrainian government, particularly in the areas of finance, defense, aviation, IT, etc. And so not just companies that are based in Ukraine, but also we've seen some companies allegedly in Latvia and Lithuania as well. The attack abuses a benign driver in the Windows operating system. This is a technique that's been consistent over the last few years with malware that's been attributed to other nation-state actors like Lazarus Group, which is probably North Korea, the APT-33 group, which might be Saudi Arabia. And by abusing this driver, it corrupts the master boot record of all the physical devices, the drives, and their partitions that are attached, so that once the machine gets shut down, the system is no longer operable. They've employed some anti-reversing techniques, such as modifying registry keys to disable system crash dumps to slow down analysis of the malware. And there's already some signatures available from antivirus vendors. It appears that some of the attacks deploying this HermeticWiper, or others are calling it the Trojan.Killdisk signature, may have also been deployed along with some ransomware as kind of a ruse to hide the true intent of the attack. Infection has been taking place through exploitation of a variety of pieces of software, including Exchange Server SMB functionality, Tomcat, and Microsoft SQL Server. So there's always the possibility that this conflict is going to escalate, and so crypto organizations really should plan around that possibility. We should be drafting and reviewing our disaster preparation plans. We should be thinking about geographic diversity of our infrastructure. And even if the actual military conflict does not go outside of Ukraine, there are various ways that countries outside of Ukraine can still be impacted. One of these of primary concern right now is military conflict around Chernobyl, which there was a disaster there back in the 80s. Famously, there's still a lot of radioactive waste there that is buried. We're already seeing dust being kicked up there and increased radiological indicators in that area. And if someone drops a bomb in the wrong spot, we could be talking about unearthing a huge amount of radiation there. And over to the right here is a little map of what the path of the radiation kind of looked like back during the original disaster. Keep in mind this doesn't simply just radiate out in a circle from the point of origin. Winds and so forth can cause this to spread all over the place, and so we may see something like that here in this situation. So as you're thinking about your disaster preparation plans, keep in mind that your ability to travel and your team members to travel may be disrupted. That includes car, trains, air, etc., right? And so if part of your disaster preparation plans revolve around, well, there's this really important asset that we have in country X, and if country X comes under threat, well, we're just going to catch the next plane and take that asset out to another place, to another installation, or we're going to stand up a new installation in some other country that we have waiting by. Well, you might not be able to get there, so factor that into your plans. And here's a list of sources for everything that I discussed today. Again, if you have any feedback or questions for me, you can reach me on Twitter at Christov Atlas. Thank you.